He was a man everyone respected in the business world. People saw him as confident, successful, and in control of everything around him. But what no one truly knew was how lonely his life had become. He was not just a CEO running one of the city's biggest companies. He was also a single father. His wife had left years ago, and since then, his life had been divided into two things only: his work and his little daughter. Each morning, his day started early. He would wake up before the sun, check his emails, and prepare for meetings that would shape the future of his company. But before stepping into that world of endless calls and tough negotiations, he always made sure to spend a little time with his daughter. She was the only light in his life, the one reason he smiled even when stress pressed on his shoulders. Still, managing both roles wasn't easy. Being a father and a CEO meant he had little time for himself. He skipped social gatherings, ignored parties, and politely declined any event that wasn't directly related to business. Many of his friends were already married, moving forward with families of their own. He, on the other hand, carried the weight of responsibilities alone. At home, there was one person who quietly kept everything in order: the maid. She wasn't just someone who cleaned or cooked. She had been working in his house for years, long enough to understand the routine, the unspoken rules, and the quiet sadness he carried. She cared deeply for the little girl, treating her almost like her own. Whenever he was late from the office, she would read bedtime stories, prepare warm milk, and make sure the child never felt lonely. For the CEO, this brought comfort. He never said it out loud, but he trusted her. In his hectic life, where every deal felt like a battlefield, knowing that someone reliable was taking care of his home gave him a sense of peace. Yet, he never really looked at her beyond that role. To him, she was part of the house, helpful, kind, but nothing more. But deep inside, he was aware of the emptiness around him. His house was large, filled with fine furniture and silent halls, yet it often felt like a cage. He could buy anything money could offer, but he couldn't buy companionship. At dinners, he sat across from his daughter, smiling and chatting with her. But when she went to bed, silence wrapped around him. The business world noticed this too. Investors whispered about his personal life, questioning whether a man without a partner could truly balance the demands of leadership. In their eyes, a stable family meant a stable company. Some even hinted that his single status might make him appear weaker during negotiations. These comments frustrated him, but he knew they carried weight. The breaking point came when his company received an invitation to an important gala. All the city's influential figures would be there: investors, partners, and competitors. It wasn't just a party. It was a stage where appearances mattered more than words. Attending alone would only fuel the rumors. He needed someone by his side, someone who could play the role of his partner, at least for one night. The thought bothered him. He was not the type to ask for such favors. But the pressure kept building. He couldn't risk his company's image, not when so much was at stake. He spent nights thinking about possible solutions. Should he hire someone? Should he ask a friend? Or should he simply face the whispers alone? Then, one evening, as he sat at the dinner table watching his daughter laugh at a story told by the maid, an idea struck him. She was already close to his daughter. She already knew the family, and above all, he trusted her. For a moment, he hesitated. How could he even ask her something so strange? She was part of his household, not someone meant to play such a role in his life. But the idea refused to leave his mind. The days moved closer to the gala, and his anxiety grew. His assistant reminded him daily about the importance of the event, about how the investors expected to see him as a stable man, not just a busy CEO. Finally, after one long day at the office, he returned home, sat in the quiet living room, and called the maid over. His voice was calm, but carried a weight of hesitation. He looked at her for a moment before speaking. "I need to ask you something unusual," he began, unsure of how she would react. She waited, curious but respectful. Then the words slipped out, words he never thought he would say to her. "Would you pretend to be my girlfriend at the gala?" The silence that followed felt endless. She looked at him, confused, as if she had misheard. He quickly added that it would only be for one night, nothing more. He explained the pressure, the whispers, and how badly he needed someone he could trust by his side. She stood still, trying to process it. She was used to taking care of his home, his daughter, but this was something else entirely. For her, it wasn't just about wearing a dress and standing beside him. It meant stepping into a world where she had never belonged. A world of power, influence, and judgment. And yet, looking at his serious face, she saw not the powerful CEO everyone else knew, but a man who was simply asking for help. She stood in silence for a long moment, unsure how to respond. The request felt so unreal, almost like something out of a story she had once overheard, but never thought would touch her life. Pretend to be the girlfriend of the man she worked for? A man whose world was filled with power, money, and decisions that affected hundreds of people? She looked down, her hands tightening nervously, not knowing if she should laugh or cry. The CEO saw her hesitation. He wasn't surprised. It wasn't a request people heard every day. He leaned forward slightly, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. I know this sounds strange. I would never ask if it wasn't important. But this gala, it matters more than I can explain. They expect me to bring someone, and I can't risk going alone. You've been with this family for years. I trust you. And I know my daughter trusts you too. That's why I thought of you. Her eyes widened a little. Trust. That word carried weight. She had always done her best to protect his home and care for the little girl, but she never imagined he saw her as someone reliable beyond her duties. For a moment, her heart softened, but then reality struck. What if she embarrassed him? What if she said the wrong thing, or wore the wrong dress, or looked completely out of place among people who lived in a world she couldn't even imagine? She shook her head lightly. Sir, I'm not sure I could do that. I've never been to such an event. I wouldn't know how to act. People would see right through me. But before he could answer, a small voice interrupted from the hallway. His daughter, holding her toy in one hand, had been listening without meaning to. She ran into the room with innocent excitement and looked up at the maid. Please say yes. I want you to come. It will be fun. We can go together like a family. The CEO froze for a second. He hadn't expected his daughter to hear, but her words carried more power than anything he could have said. The maid turned to look at the child's hopeful eyes. It was difficult to say no when the little girl smiled so brightly, almost as if the thought of the three of them being together outside the house filled her with joy. The maid sighed softly. She knew she was stepping into something she didn't fully understand, but how could she refuse when both father and daughter looked at her that way? All right, she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. If this is what you need, I'll do it, but only for the night. Relief washed over his face. For once, the powerful man who commanded boardrooms looked almost vulnerable, grateful in a way words couldn't capture. He thanked her sincerely, promising it wouldn't be too difficult, just a matter of appearances, just standing by his side and smiling when needed. She nodded, though her heart beat faster with every detail he gave. The following days felt strange. Preparations for the gala began almost immediately. The CEO arranged for a stylist to visit the house, insisting she needed a proper dress for the evening. At first, she resisted. She didn't want him to spend money on her, not for something that wasn't real. But he was firm, reminding her that appearances mattered. They will look at you as much as they look at me. You deserve to walk in with confidence. When the day of the fitting arrived, she stood nervously in front of the mirror. For years, her clothes had always been practical, meant for work, comfort, and modesty. Now, as the stylist draped an elegant gown over her shoulders, she barely recognized the reflection staring back. Her hair was styled differently, her posture adjusted, and for the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't just the maid in the background of someone else's life. She looked like someone who belonged, even if it was just for one night. The CEO walked into the room at that moment to check on the progress. He stopped mid-step, his expression shifting from casual observation to quiet surprise. He had expected her to look different, of course, but not like this. There was something natural in the way she carried herself, something that made her stand out without even trying. He quickly caught himself before saying too much, but the silence that lingered spoke louder than words. That evening, As they sat together at dinner, his daughter couldn't stop staring at the maid in her gown. She clapped her hands in delight. "You look like a princess," she exclaimed. The maid laughed softly, embarrassed but touched by the innocence in the child's words. The CEO cleared his throat, reminding himself why all of this was happening. "Remember," he said firmly, "this is only for one night. You don't need to speak much, just stay close to me and smile when necessary. People will believe what they want to believe." She nodded, though deep inside she couldn't shake the nervousness. The idea of walking into a hall filled with people who judged everything, from the clothes on your back to the way you held a glass, terrified her. She wasn't trained for this world. Yet she promised herself she would not let him down. As the gala approached, the house buzzed with quiet anticipation. The CEO checked schedules, made calls, and planned every detail, while the maid tried to steady her nerves. She often wondered why he hadn't chosen someone else, someone from his own circle, someone who already belonged in that world. But every time she thought about backing out, she remembered the look on his face when he first asked. It wasn't just business pressure. There was something more behind his request, a vulnerability he rarely showed. And so, the night drew closer. The dress was ready, the plan was set, and all that remained was the moment when she would step out of her familiar life and into his world, pretending to be something she never imagined she could be. The night of the gala arrived sooner than she expected. The city lights sparkled outside as the car pulled up to the house, waiting to take them to the event. She stood in her room, staring at her reflection in the mirror, her heart beating so loudly it felt as if the whole house could hear it. The dress fit perfectly, the hair and makeup were done, yet her hands shook as she adjusted the bracelet on her wrist. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "Don't make a mistake. Just breathe. Just stand beside him." Downstairs, the CEO was waiting in a tailored suit, his daughter holding onto his hand. When the maid finally walked down the staircase, silence filled the hall. The little girl's face lit up instantly. "You're beautiful," she whispered, her voice full of awe. The CEO nodded slowly, trying to remain composed, but his eyes gave away his surprise. For a moment, the lines between their roles blurred. He wasn't looking at his maid anymore. He was looking at a woman who could hold her own in any room. The drive to the gala was quiet. She kept glancing out of the window, trying to calm her nerves, while he gave her quick reminders. "Stay close to me. Don't worry if they ask you questions, I'll handle it. Just smile." She nodded, clutching her purse, silently promising herself she wouldn't let him down. When the car finally stopped in front of the Grand Hotel, cameras flashed instantly. Reporters and photographers lined the entrance, capturing every arrival. Her stomach tightened. She had never been in the spotlight, never faced a crowd like this. But then she felt his hand reach for hers, steady and reassuring. "It's all right," he said softly. "Just follow my lead." Together, they stepped out. For the first time in her life, she walked into a world that didn't belong to her. The marble floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled above, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Eyes turned immediately. Whispers began to spread across the hall. Everyone knew the CEO as a single father who avoided social gatherings. Yet here he was, arriving with a woman by his side. At first, the maid wanted to disappear, to run back into the safety of the car. But then she noticed the CEO's calm expression, the way he held himself with quiet confidence. He squeezed her hand slightly, a silent message telling her she wasn't alone. That gave her courage to keep walking. The investors gathered quickly, their smiles polite but their curiosity sharp. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, leaned forward and asked, "And who might this be?" For a moment, she froze. Her mouth went dry. But before she could stumble over an answer, the CEO's voice came in smoothly. "This is someone very important to me," he said firmly. The words were simple, but the way he spoke them left no room for doubt. The investors nodded, intrigued, and quickly shifted the conversation back to business. Throughout the evening, she stayed close to him, just as he had asked. She smiled when needed, listened quietly, and responded with short, polite answers when people spoke to her. At first, she thought they would see through her, that they would notice she wasn't one of them. But something unexpected happened. They didn't look down on her. Instead, many seemed charmed by her simplicity. While others at the gala spoke in rehearsed phrases and shallow compliments, her honesty and quiet presence stood out. The CEO noticed it too. As he watched her from the corner of his eye, he realized she wasn't just fitting in. She was making an impression. And he couldn't help but feel proud, though he tried to hide it behind his usual composed expression. Later in the evening, as the music softened and couples began moving to the dance floor, one of his colleagues teased him. "You should dance with her. After all, what's the point of bringing someone if you're not going to show her off?" The suggestion made his chest tighten. Dancing wasn't part of the plan. He hadn't prepared her for that. But when he turned to her, he saw a small, nervous smile on her face. Before she could refuse, he offered his hand. "May I?" She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. They stepped onto the dance floor, the lights dimming slightly as the music surrounded them. At first, her movements were stiff, uncertain, but his steady guidance helped her relax. Slowly, she allowed herself to follow his lead. For a few moments, the world outside faded away. It didn't feel like pretending anymore. As the song played, she caught his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't love yet, but it was something close. A recognition, a connection neither of them expected to feel that night. When the dance ended, soft applause filled the room. She blushed, looking down, while he guided her back to their table with a quiet smile. For the rest of the evening, he noticed how often people approached her, not just to ask who she was, but to genuinely talk with her. She laughed at small jokes, spoke gently, and carried herself with a natural warmth no training could teach. By the time the gala ended, whispers had already spread across the room. Some spoke about the CEO's surprising choice of partner. Others admired how genuine she seemed. For once, the rumors didn't bother him. Tonight, he had shown the world something they couldn't question. He was not just a powerful man, but a man who stood proudly with someone by his side. When they finally returned to the car, silence filled the space again. She leaned back, exhausted, while he glanced at her briefly. "You did well," he said quietly. "Better than I expected." She turned her head toward him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I just did my best," she replied. But deep inside, both of them knew something had changed that night. The act that was supposed to be nothing more than pretending had started to feel real. And neither of them was ready to admit it just yet. The days after the gala didn't feel the same. At first, the maid thought everything would return to normal. She would go back to her duties, cleaning the house, preparing meals, and caring for the little girl. The gown was carefully packed away, the shoes placed back in their box, and she reminded herself that it was only for one night. A performance. Nothing more. But that wasn't how things turned out. The CEO seemed quieter than usual. Not cold, not distant, just different. He watched her a little longer when she spoke, listened more carefully when she explained something about the house or his daughter's routine. There was a softness in his expression that hadn't been there before, and it unsettled her. For the little girl, the change was even more obvious. She couldn't stop talking about the night of the gala. At breakfast, she would chirp, "When will we go out again like that? You look so pretty." At bedtime, she would ask the maid to tell the story of the evening, as if it were a fairy tale she wanted to relive. Slowly, the child began to treat her less like a caretaker and more like someone who belonged in the family. The maid didn't know how to handle it. Each time the girl slipped her small hand into hers, calling her like a mom, her heart tightened. She had never been called that before. She reminded herself not to read too much into it, but feelings are not so easily controlled. Meanwhile, the CEO began relying on her in ways that went beyond household duties. He would come home late for meetings, and instead of retreating into his study, he would sit at the kitchen table while she prepared dinner. He would ask how her day went, how his daughter behaved, even small questions about her life. At first, she answered cautiously, unsure why he was asking. But slowly, the conversations grew longer. She told him about her childhood, her struggles, her dreams she had buried because life had been too difficult. He listened, not as an employer, but as a man who truly wanted to know her. One evening, As the rain tapped against the windows, he found her reading to his daughter by the fireplace. The child had fallen asleep with her head resting on the maid's lap, the book still open in her hand. The scene froze him in place. For years, he had felt guilty for not being able to give his daughter the kind of family she deserved. Yet here it was, warmth, comfort, stability, something money alone could never create. And it was all because of the woman who, until recently, had been invisible to the world around him. But as these small moments added up, confusion crept into the maid's heart. She hadn't agreed to this. She had promised herself she would keep distance. She was the maid, nothing more. Pretending to be his partner for one night was already a risk, but now the lines were blurring. Every kind gesture, every quiet conversation, every lingering glance made it harder for her to separate reality from the role she had played. One afternoon, as she was folding laundry, she caught herself smiling at the thought of him. She quickly shook her head, almost scolding herself. "Stop it," she whispered. "This isn't your place." She reminded herself of the difference between their worlds. He was a powerful man, respected by all. She was someone who worked in the shadows, unnoticed except when her duties demanded it. There was no future in imagining more. And yet, her heart betrayed her. The CEO noticed too. He found himself distracted at work, replaying small details in his mind. The sound of her laugh, the way she tucked his daughter's hair behind her ear, the shy way she avoided his eyes when he complimented her cooking. He told himself it was foolish, that he couldn't afford to feel this way. She was part of his household, an employee, and crossing that line would complicate everything. But then there were moments he couldn't ignore. One evening, he arrived home to find his daughter crying in her room. She had fallen at school and scraped her knee. The maid was there, kneeling by her side, gently cleaning the wound while whispering comfort. The child clung to her, whispering, "Don't leave me." Watching them together, his chest tightened with something deeper than gratitude. It was something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. As the weeks passed, the company invited him to more events, dinners, and gatherings. And each time, without thinking, he found himself asking her to join him. What started as a single night of pretending had become a routine. They were seen together often, and whispers began to spread. People started calling her his partner, and he didn't correct them. At first, she protested. "You don't need me there," she said. But he would always answer, "Yes, I do." One night, after another long dinner meeting, they returned home and sat quietly in the living room. The house was still, the child already asleep. He poured himself a glass of water, then glanced at her. "You know," he said slowly, "this was supposed to be just one night. But it doesn't feel that way anymore." Her breath caught. She looked away, not trusting her voice. The truth was clear, but saying it out loud felt dangerous. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, but the fear of losing everything held her back. And so, the silence lingered between them. Both of them knew something had changed. Both of them felt it. But neither dared to speak the words that could alter their lives forever. The silence between them could not last forever. The more time they spent together, the heavier the unspoken words became. What had begun as a small act of pretending now hung over them, like a secret both were too afraid to confess. The maid felt it every day. Each time the little girl reached for her hand, each time the CEO's eyes lingered on her a moment longer than necessary. Her heart betrayed her. She found herself waiting for his footsteps at the door in the evenings, listening for the sound of his voice. And yet, every night she reminded herself, this is not your life. She was only meant to be a helper, a caretaker, someone who stayed in the background. If she crossed the line, she risked everything. One evening, she made up her mind. She couldn't go on like this. Her feelings had grown too strong, and it frightened her. She decided she would leave, before things went too far. Quietly, she began to pack a small bag, folding her clothes with trembling hands. The thought of saying goodbye to the little girl broke her heart, but it felt safer than staying and living with the pain of wanting something she could never have. But before she could finish, the door to her room opened. The CEO stood there, his face shadowed with confusion. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low. She froze, her hands clutching the bag. I can't stay, she whispered. This has gone too far. I was only supposed to help you for one night. But now, her voice cracked, and she turned away, unable to meet his eyes. Now it feels like I'm living someone else's life. And it's not mine to live. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His words came slowly, carefully, as if he had been holding them back for far too long. Do you think you're the only one who feels this way? Do you think I haven't noticed what's happening? He paused, searching her face. Every day, I find myself looking for you, listening for your voice, watching the way you care for my daughter. You've become part of us. And I can't imagine this house without you. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but fear still held her. You don't mean that, she whispered. You're just saying it because you need me here. He shook his head firmly. No, I needed you to pretend once. But I don't want pretending anymore. I don't want an act. I don't want appearances. I want the truth. His voice softened. And the truth is, I've fallen for you. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. She felt tears sting her eyes as she turned to face him fully. For so long, she had hidden her feelings, convinced they were foolish. Hearing him say it out loud was almost too much to take. I've fallen too, she admitted in a trembling voice. But I was afraid of losing my place here, afraid of what people would say, afraid you would change your mind. He stepped closer, closing the space between them. I don't care what people say. I only care about what we feel about what's real. For a long moment, they stood in silence, hearts racing, the truth finally spoken. Then, with a gentleness that matched the weight of the moment, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. For the first time, there was no need to pretend. The next morning, the house felt different. The little girl noticed it right away. She ran into the kitchen, saw the maid and her father standing close together, and smiled in delight. Are we a family now? She asked innocently. The maid glanced at the CEO, uncertain of what to say. But he crouched down beside his daughter, placing a hand on her shoulder. Yes, he said softly. We are. The child squealed with joy, hugging them both tightly. In that simple embrace, everything became clear. They were no longer living in a performance, no longer bound by roles of employer and employee, of CEO and maid. They were just three people who had found each other, three hearts that had built a home together. Over time, whispers spread again, as they always did. Some questioned, some doubted, but the CEO no longer cared. He had spent too many years worrying about appearances. Now he cared only about the truth. And the truth was that love had entered his life in the most unexpected way, through the woman who was once invisible to the world, but had quietly become the center of his. And as the maid walked through the halls of the house, no longer with the weight of fear, but with the warmth of belonging, she realized something too. She hadn't stolen his heart, as the world might say. She had simply cared, and in caring, she had been loved in return. What began as an unusual request had ended as something far more powerful, a real family, built not on appearances or pretending, but on love.